solving systems with 3 equations and 3 variables, x, y, and z. What I want you to do is go ahead and turn your paper over to the back, and I want to write down just a few tips. So if you have 3 equations, you might not even know where do I even start. So here's some tips from me to you in solving systems. So here's my tips. So my first tip, you need to start with the shortest equations. So it might just be one equation that's short, might be multiple. So start with the shortest equation or equations. So start with the shortest equation. And my second and final tip will be to look for 0 pairs. So if you look at a problem and you're not sure where to even begin, look at tip number 1. Start with the shortest equations. Then look at tip number 2. Look for any 0 pairs that you might see with a pair of equations. Okay, so we're going to use those 2 tips to start with problem number 1. So what's tip number 1? Start with the what? Shortest equation. So looking at number 1, do you see any equations that are shorter than the rest? Yes, so that's what I'm talking about. I want you to start with these 2 that are short. Now notice this kind of looks like one of our methods we've already done before. If you have a variable by itself, is that elimination or substitution? Substitution. So let's do a little bit of substitution for this one. So I'm going to circle the 3z. And I'm going to draw my arrow. I can't draw it to this equation because does this equation have an x in it? No, so I'm going to draw my arrow down here to the bottom equation. Then my second short equation is y equals 2z. So circle the 2z and draw your arrow to the y in the bottom equation. So we are going to substitute in for x and y. So instead of x, what am I replacing it with? 3z. Bring down your plus sign. Instead of y, I replace it with 2z. Bring down the plus z equals 12. What's next? Combine your like terms. So it's 3z plus 2z plus 1z. So 6z equals 12. Divide both sides by 6. What does z equal? 2. There's a third of the answer. So once you have z, then you'll have to find y and x. So looking at these 2 equations, I can use the top and bottom to get the last 2 answers. So let me switch to green. If I want to get y next, I'm going to use that second equation, y equals 2z. But instead of z, what do I replace the z with? 2. So this would be 2 times 2, and 2 times 2 is 4. So there's another third of the answer. So I have z, I have y. What else do I need? X. So for x, which equation would I have to use? Yeah, I can use that top equation, x equals 3z. I'll put a little line through my z so it doesn't look like a 2. And instead of z, what do I replace the z with? A 2. And 3 times 2 is 6. Now, when we've been writing our solutions previously, we did x comma y. It was an ordered pair. Now these, since we have 3 parts to it, this is called an ordered triple. So when you write your ordered triple, it's still alphabetic. So it's going to be x comma y comma z. So it's going to be an ordered triple. So what do I put for x? 6. What do I put for y? 4. What do I put for z? 2. So make sure they're in alphabetic order. X, comma, Y, comma, Z. Questions on problem 1? Moving on to problem 2. Problem number 2. Tip number 1. What is tip number 1? Start with the smallest or shortest equation. So looking at those three, which one is the smallest equation? Which one? Oh, I like this. Why do I like that? It already gave me one of my answers. So I know for x, comma, y, comma, z, the x value is already 3. They already gave us one of the answers. So if it's by itself, I'm going to circle it. And since that was my shortest equation, what's the next shortest equation? X plus y equals 6. So I'm going to substitute this into the next smallest equation. So instead of the x, I replace it with what? So this gives me 3 plus y equals 6. What's next? Subtract 3 to both sides. And what does y equal? 3. So over here, my ordered triple, I have x. The y is 3. Now I need to find z. Well, what is the only equation that has a z in it? The top one. So to solve for z, I have to use that top equation. There's no way around that. So 2x minus 4y plus 2z equals 6. Now substitute in our value. So this 3 needs to go right here. So what's 2 times 3? 6. And this 3 needs to go right here for y. So that's going to be negative 4 times positive 3. Then bring down the plus 2z equals 6. So we already said 2 times 3 is 6. And what's negative 4 times 3? Negative 12 plus 2z equals 6. What should we do next? Combine your like terms. So what's 6 minus 12? Negative 6 plus 2z equals positive 6. What's next? Add 6 to both sides. So 2z equals 12. Divide both sides by 2. And what does z equal? 6. So make sure you fill in that final answer. So for the ordered triple, it's 3, 3, 6. So x, y, z. Now this looks very, very complicated, but is it? No, it's really not. Okay, next one, problem number 3. Now, my tips. What was tip number 1? Look for the shortest equations. Where are the shortest equations? The bottom two. So looking at these two equations right here, those are set up for what? Elimination or substitution. So do elimination. So I'm going to rewrite the system down here. 2x minus y equals 5. X plus y equals 1. How do I know this is an elimination form? Variables are on the left. The constants are on the right. Do you see a zero pair? Yeah. Negative y, positive y, there's a zero pair. Combine your x's. What's 2x plus 1x? 3x. And 5 plus 1 is 6. Divide both sides by 3. What is x? 2. There's a third of the answer. Now to find the y, do I want to use equation 2 or equation 3? 3. So x plus y equals 1. Instead of x, I replace it with, so 2 plus y equals 1. Subtract 2 to both sides. So that would be y equals, what's 1 minus 2? Negative 1. So we have x, we have y. What are we missing? Z. Well, what is the only equation that has a z in it? The top. So to solve for z, we have to use that top equation. So the top equation is x plus y plus z equals 1. What do I put for x? 2. What do I put for y? Negative 1 plus z equals 1. What's 2 minus 1? So 1 plus z equals 1. Subtract 1 to both sides. Z equals 0. So your solution needs to be an ordered triple. X, comma, y, comma, z. So what's our ordered triple? 2, comma, negative 1, comma, 0. So make sure it's alphabetic. We're halfway through the notes. Next one. Problem number 4. Now, if I use my tips, what's tip number 1? Look for the shortest equation. Well, do you see an equation that's short? The one at the bottom. Now, this is ready for elimination, but do I have another equation that's ready for elimination? No. So then I would think about tip number 2. And what did we write down for tip number 2? Look for a 0 pair. So do you see a 0 pair with any of those variables up there? Yeah. Negative z, positive z, what happens? Those cancel out, and then I'm just left with x and y. So what we're going to do is if you have 3 systems, you can combine 2 equations together. So I want to combine these 2 equations together. And I'll rewrite it over here. So when I combine these equations, combine your x's. What's 1x plus 2x? 3x. Combine the y's. Positive y, negative 2y gives me negative y. And what did we say about these z's? They're a 0 pair. They go away. And then for the constants, combine the answers. What's 3 minus 2? 1. So if you have 3 equations, you can combine 2 of the equations together by adding them. Now, did I change the bottom equation at all? Did I add it with anything? No. So this bottom equation, I'm going to rewrite right below this. So 3x plus 4y equals 11. Now, looking at this system right here, it's ready for elimination or substitution. Elimination. But do we have a 0 pair? No. Which one's close to being a 0 pair? The x's, we have positive 3x, positive 3x. In order to be a 0 pair, one of them would have to be a negative. So what do one of the equations have to be multiplied by? You want to multiply the top one by what? Negative 1? Now, I have room to keep going to the side, so I'll do that. I'll distribute the negative 1. So what's negative 1 times 3x? Negative 3x. What's negative 1 times negative y? Positive y. And negative 1 times positive 1? Negative 1. The bottom equation, does it change? So keep it. 3x plus 4y equals 11. Now do you see a 0 pair? Yes. Negative 3x, positive 3x is a 0 pair. Combine your y's. 1y plus 4y is 5y. And negative 1 plus 11, 10. Divide both sides by 5. And we get what? Y equals 2. Y equals 2. That's only one answer. All of that work, and do I have all the answer? No, I just have a third of the answer. So don't do all that work and think you're finished, because we're not. Now, after we have y, we need to find x and z. So which equation do we want to use to find x? Yeah, try to use one of the shorter ones. So we have 3x plus 4y equals 11. And instead of y, we just solved for y, and we said that y was 5, correct? Or was it 2? 2, sorry. So we said that y is 2. So what's 4 times 2? So 3x plus 8 equals 11. Subtract 8 to both sides. We get 3x equals 11 minus 8 is 3. Divide both sides by 3. What do we get for x? 1. We have y. We have x. Which one are we missing? Z. Which equations have a z? The top two. So out of the top two, I can pick either one. Which one looks easier, the first one or the second one? First one. So x plus y minus z equals 3. What do I put for x? 1. What do I put for y? 2 minus z. Again, I'm putting this little line through the z so you can tell it's the z and not a 2. Combine my like terms. 1 plus 2 is, so 3 minus z equals 3. What's next? Subtract 3 to both sides. So that gives me negative z equals 3 minus 3 is 0. How do I get rid of the negative? Divide both sides by negative 1. And what does z equal? 0. Am I finished? Did I write my order triple? No, so I'm not quite finished. So my order triple, I'm going to squeeze it in right here. What do I put for x? What do I put for y? 2, 0. So make sure you have your order triple. 1, comma, 2, comma, 0 inside parentheses. So let's recap this problem, because if you notice, my screen is filled with lots of math there. So let's just recap what we did. What was tip number 1? Look for the shortest equation. But we just had one short equation. Did that help us at all? No. So what was tip number 2? Look for a zero pair. Did we find a zero pair with 2 of the equations? Yes. So when we did that, we combined the top 2 equations together to make that zero pair. And then once we did that, we had elimination, and we could take it from there. Next one, number 5. Okay, number 5. Tip number 1. What's tip number 1? Look for the shortest equation. Do I have a short equation there? No. So that doesn't help me at all. So what's tip number 2? Look for a zero pair. Do you see a zero pair anywhere? Where? We have a y here. We have a z here. And what about right here? Do we? Yeah. So here, where do we have the most zero pairs? The top 2. So let's work with that group first, because that has the most zero pairs. So let's combine these 2 together. So whatever equations I'm combining together, I'm just kind of bricking them up and putting a little grouping symbol out to this side so I can see which equations I'm combining together. So when I combine these, 1x plus 1x gives me 2x. And what happens with the y's and the z's? Zero pair, zero pair. And 3 minus 3 is 0. So that's going to work out nicely, because if I divide both sides by 2, what does x equal? 0. So that gave me a third of the answer. But what happens if I tried to solve for y? What happens if I put a 0 right here? Could I get the y? If I put a 0 here, could I get the y? No. So that's not going to help me anymore. So after you've combined the top two equations, you could try to combine the bottom two equations. So now let's combine the bottom two equations and see what happens. And I'll do that down here. So if I combine the bottom two, what's 1x plus 3x? 4x. If I combine the y's, negative y and negative 2y gives me negative 3y. And negative z, positive z gives me, it cancels out, right? And here, what's negative 3 plus 0? Negative 3. Now, do you have any ideas? Now, what happens if I put a 0 right here? This cancels, right? Because that's 0. So that just gives me negative 3y equals negative 3. Divide both sides by negative 3. What does y equal? Positive 1. Why did that cancel? Because here if I put a 0, what is 0 times 4? 0. So if I add 0 or subtract 0, does that change the answer? No. So it just cancels for us. So we have x, we have y. What are we missing? Z. So I have multiple options. All three of these have a z in it. So you get to choose which one looks easiest. So do I want to use the first, second, or third? First, second, or third? First. So x plus y plus z equals 3. What do I put for x? 0. What do I put for y? And we're solving for z. Combine these. 0 plus 1 is, so 1 plus z equals 3. Subtract 1 to both sides, and what does z equal? 2. Am I finished? Write your ordered triple. X, comma, y, comma, z. What's my triple? 0, comma, 1, comma, 2. Last one, number 6. Oops, I thought I had the mouse. Okay, number 6, using my tips. What was tip number 1? Shortest equation. Do we have a short equation here? No, all of them are long. So what's tip number 2? Look for a 0 pair. Do you see a 0 pair with two equations? Yeah, positive 2x, negative 2x. There's a 0 pair. What do you notice right here? A 0 pair. So let's do that. Let's take care of those 0 pairs. So we're going to combine the top two equations and the bottom two equations. So combine these two. And when I combine these, 0 pair for the x's, negative y makes negative 2y. Positive z, positive 2z gives me 3z. And 6 minus 1 is 5. Now, does that help me? No, it doesn't, because I still have two variables. Now, let's combine the bottom two. So combine the bottom two. What happens with the x's? They cancel. Negative y, positive 2y gives me, what's 2y minus y? Y. What's 2z plus 2z? 4z. And negative 1 plus 4 is 3. I want you to finish number 6. Those two equations are set up for what? Elimination. How do you know those are set up for elimination? Variables are on the left, the constants are on the right. Now, do you have a zero pair? No, but if you have a negative 2y, what does that bottom one have to be? Positive 2y. So that bottom equation should have been multiplied by what? Positive 2. Top equation stays the same. Negative 2y plus 3z equals 5. Distributing the 2, what's 2 times y? 2y. And what's 2 times 4z? 8z. And 2 times 3? 6. Negative 2y, positive 2y. Here's my zero pair. Combining the z's was 3z plus 8z. 11z. 5 plus 6. Divide both sides by 11. What does z equal? Now that I have z, now I need to find x and y. So go back to the original. Well, let's use one of these originals here. Do I want to use this one or the bottom one? The top one, negative 2y plus 3z equals 5. So here z is 1. So what's 3 times 1? 3. Subtract 3 to both sides. So it's negative 2y equals 2. Divide both sides by negative 2. What does y equal? Negative 1. So just make sure you use one of the originals before we distributed the 2. So we have z, we have y. What are we missing? X. So now we can use one of the originals. And do we want to use the first, second, or third? First, 2x minus y plus z equals 6. Let's see. Z is 1. And for y, what happens when I put a negative 1 right here? Yeah, it changes to positive 1. And z was 1. What's next? Combine like terms. 1 plus 1 is, so 2x plus 2 equals 6. Subtract 2 to both sides. We get 2x equals 4. Divide both sides by 2. We get x equals 2. So what would my ordered triple be? 2, negative 1, 1. So x, comma, y, comma, z. And we made it through the notes. So remember the 2 tips. What was tip number 1? Look for the shortest equations. If that doesn't help you, what's tip number 2? Look for a zero pair by combining 2 equations. So we might want to add that. So where I wrote my tips, look for a zero pairs, you might want to add, combine 2 equations. So combine 2 equations to make your zero pair. Now for your assignments, if you can fit everything on the worksheet, that's fine. So if you were able to do all the notes on the handout, you'll probably be fine. But if you ran out of room, if you write large, you'll need to do your work on your own notebook paper.